Detroit, 1977. The studio lights were burning hot, and Marvin Gaye sat behind the microphone, staring at the lyric sheet for Got to Give It Up. The song was destined to become a hit. Everyone knew it. The groove was infectious, the melody irresistible. But as the track played back through the speakers, something inside Marvin snapped. He stood up slowly, removed his headphones, and walked toward the control room where Barry Gordy was nodding approvingly. The music continued playing, but Marvin wasn't hearing it anymore. All he heard was the sound of his own voice being packaged, processed, and prepared for consumption. "Turn it off," Marvin said quietly. Barry looked confused. "What's wrong? It sounds perfect." "Turn it off," Marvin repeated louder this time. The music stopped. The silence that followed felt heavier than the bass line that had been pounding just moments before. Marvin looked around the room at the faces staring back at him. Producers, engineers, executives. All of them waiting for him to perform, to be the product they needed him to be. "I'm done," Marvin announced. "I'm not your dancing monkey anymore." He walked out of Hitsville, USA that night and didn't look back. But he didn't go home either. Instead, he drove through the streets of Detroit until he found what he was looking for. A boxing gym, not a fancy health club or a trendy fitness center. A real gym where real men went to become fighters. The decision wasn't sudden, though it felt that way to everyone around him. For months, Marvin had been questioning everything about his life, his career, his identity. Success felt like a prison with golden bars. Fame felt like a costume he couldn't take off, suffocating him slowly with each public appearance, each forced smile. The breaking point had been building for years. It started with small moments of disconnection, standing on stage looking out at thousands of screaming fans and feeling completely alone, sitting in meetings where executives discussed his image as if he weren't in the room. And every time he looked in the mirror, especially after these moments of public triumph and private emptiness, he saw what his father had always told him he was: soft, weak, not a real man. The voice was always there, a constant whisper underneath every achievement, every standing ovation, every Grammy consideration. Marvin Gaye Sr. had been a preacher, but he ruled his house like a dictator. Physical strength meant everything to him. Emotional vulnerability was sin. And music, the thing that came most naturally to Marvin, was viewed with suspicion. "Real men don't sing love songs to women," his father had said more than once. "Real men fight." So at 38 years old, with a career spanning nearly 2 decades and millions of records sold, Marvin decided to become what his father had always wanted him to be: a fighter. The gym he found was called Kronk, run by a trainer named Emmanuel Stewart, who had a reputation for creating champions. The building itself was unremarkable from the outside, a converted warehouse in a rough neighborhood where nobody would think to look for a Motown superstar. Inside, it smelled of sweat, leather, and determination. The walls were covered with faded photographs of fighters, some famous, most forgotten, all of them carrying that same look of desperate hunger in their eyes. Marvin didn't announce who he was when he walked in. He just asked to train. Emmanuel looked him up and down, noting the soft hands and expensive clothes, but saw something else too: desperation maybe, or hunger. Either way, it was enough to earn him a chance. The first few weeks were brutal beyond anything Marvin had imagined. His hands, accustomed to piano keys and microphone grips, swelled and bled from hitting heavy bags. His body, soft from years of studio life and catered meals, ached constantly. Simple exercises that teenage fighters performed effortlessly left him gasping and shaking. There were moments, usually around 2 a.m., when he couldn't sleep because of the pain, when he questioned his sanity. What was he trying to prove? But when morning came and he looked at his reflection, seeing the slowly developing muscles, the hardening hands, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: progress towards something real. But Marvin pushed through the pain because pain felt more real than anything he had experienced in years. When his fists connected with the leather, when sweat poured down his face, when his lungs burned from exertion, he felt authentic in a way that no standing ovation had ever made him feel. He trained in the mornings before most people were awake, hoping to avoid recognition. He told the other fighters his name was just Marvin, nothing more. Some of them suspected he might be the famous singer, but in the gym, nobody cared about celebrity. What mattered was whether you could take a punch and whether you had the heart to keep standing when everything in your body told you to quit. For 3 months, Marvin lived this double life. By day, he dodged phone calls from Motown executives who were panicking about his disappearance. By night, he studied boxing footage and practiced footwork in his living room. His hands grew calloused, his reflexes sharpened. His confidence began to build in a way that felt different from the artificial boost of musical success. But he wasn't the only one training at Kronk during those months. Word had spread through Detroit's boxing community that Muhammad Ali, nearing the end of his legendary career, was using the gym for his own training sessions. Ali was 35, still fighting, but clearly not the force he had once been. His presence at the gym created a reverent atmosphere. Even the toughest fighters spoke in hushed tones when the champion was working. Marvin had been careful to avoid these sessions. The last thing he wanted was to be recognized and have his new life exposed. But on a humid Tuesday evening in late July, his regular training time overlapped with Ali's visit. When Marvin walked into the gym, he saw the unmistakable figure of the heavyweight champion shadowboxing in the center ring. For a moment, Marvin considered leaving, but something stubborn in him refused to be chased away. This was his time, his space now. He had earned it through sweat and pain, so he went to his usual heavy bag in the corner and began his routine. The gym gradually emptied as Ali finished his workout. Other fighters drifted away, heading home for dinner and rest. But Marvin stayed, attacking the bag with an intensity that came from somewhere deeper than physical conditioning. His hands were bleeding again inside the worn gloves, but he didn't stop, couldn't stop. From across the gym, Ali watched silently. For 10 minutes, he observed this stranger who fought the bag like it owed him money, who moved with grace but carried himself like a man running from something. Finally, Ali approached. "You train here long?" Ali asked, his voice carrying that familiar cadence that had charmed and challenged the world. Marvin paused mid-punch, breathing heavily. "Few months." "You got natural rhythm," Ali observed. "Most fighters, they just muscle through. You got music in your movement." The word music hit Marvin like a left hook he didn't see coming. He steadied himself against the bag and looked directly at Ali for the first time. "You're that singer, aren't you?" Ali said, not accusingly, but with genuine curiosity. "What's going on?" "That was you." Marvin's shoulders sagged. The secret was out. "Not anymore." "What you mean, not anymore? You retire from singing?" "I quit," Marvin said, pulling off his gloves with more force than necessary. Blood had seeped through the tape on his knuckles. "I'm done with all that. I'm training to be a fighter now. This is who I really am." Ali studied the blood on Marvin's hands, then looked back up at his face. There was something in the champion's expression that made Marvin suddenly self-conscious, as if Ali could see through all the months of physical transformation to the wounded man underneath. "How long you been boxing?" 3 months, but I'm serious about it. I train every day. I study film. I'm not playing around here." 3 months, Ali repeated thoughtfully, as if he were calculating something in his head. "And how long you been making music?" "Since I was kid, but—" "So you've been fighting with music longer than you've been fighting with your fists," Ali interrupted. "That's interesting. You've been fighting racism with your songs. You've been fighting heartbreak with your melodies. You've been fighting your father's voice in your head with every note you ever sang. That's what real fighting looks like." Marvin felt defensive. "This is different. This is real. Music industry is all fake, all about making other people money. Boxing is honest." "Boxing is honest?" Ali laughed, but not mockingly. "Son, you think Don King is more honest than Berry Gordy? You think promoters don't make money off fighters getting their brains scrambled?" "It's not about money," Marvin insisted. "It's about proving something, about being strong." "To who? To yourself? Or to somebody else?" The question hung in the air between them. Ali moved closer, his voice dropping to a more intimate tone. "Let me tell you something, young brother. I've been fighting since I was 12 years old. Started because some man stole my bicycle, and a cop told me I better learn to fight if I wanted to get it back. You know what I learned in all these years?" Marvin waited. The hardest fight ain't in the ring. The hardest fight is with yourself, in your own mind. And you can't win that fight by running away from who you are. You don't understand, Marvin said. My whole life, people told me I was soft. My father said real men don't make love songs. I want to prove him wrong. Your father, Allie repeated. He's still talking in your head? Marvin nodded reluctantly. Mine too, Allie admitted. But you know what I figured out? You don't prove your father wrong by becoming what he thinks you should be. You prove him wrong by becoming who you are and being the best at it that ever lived. Allie gestured toward Marvin's hands, which were still wrapped in tape and showing spots of blood. These hands, he said, they gifted. God gave them to you for a reason, and it wasn't to get beat up in some gym in Detroit. You want to be a fighter? Then fight for your music. Fight for your right to make the sounds that come from your soul. That takes more courage than stepping in any ring. Marvin felt something crack inside his chest. Not breaking, but opening. But what if people think I'm weak? People gonna think what they gonna think regardless, Allie said. The question is, what do you think? You think making What's Going On was weak? That song touched more hearts than any punch I ever thrown. For the first time in months, Marvin felt tears forming in his eyes. Not from physical pain, but from recognition. Recognition of the truth he had been running from. I was scared, he whispered. Of what? Of not being good enough. Of being a fraud. Of my father being right about me. Allie placed a hand on Marvin's shoulder. Fear ain't the enemy, brother. Giving up on your gifts because of fear, that's the enemy. You want to honor the man who created you? Then honor what he put inside you. The gym was nearly empty now. Outside, Detroit was settling into evening. Marvin unwrapped his hands slowly, looking at the raw knuckles and split skin. You gonna keep coming here? Allie asked. I don't know, Marvin answered honestly. Well, if you do, keep working on that rhythm. But if you don't, get back to doing what only you can do. The world got plenty of boxers. It only got one Marvin Gaye. Allie started to walk away, then turned back. And son, your father was wrong. Takes a strong man to open his heart in front of the whole world. That's what you do every time you sing. After Allie left, Marvin sat alone on a wooden bench, staring at his damaged hands. For 3 months, he had been trying to transform them into weapons. But as he looked at them now, he remembered what they were meant to be. Instruments of creation, not destruction. He drove home that night and went straight to his piano. His fingers were stiff and sore, but they remembered their purpose. The music that came out was different from anything he had recorded before. Darker, more complex, tinged with the pain and confusion of recent months, but also with a new understanding of what strength really meant. The notes felt heavy under his damaged fingertips, each chord a conversation between the man he had been trying to become and the man he had always been. The melodies carried the rhythm he had learned in the gym, but transformed it into something that could heal rather than hurt. The boxing gloves remained in his car for weeks afterward, a reminder of the detour he had almost taken permanently. He would see them every morning when he went to the studio, a tangible symbol of the path not taken. Eventually, he would give them away to a young fighter at Kronk, who actually belonged in that world, who had the hunger and desperation that Marvin had mistaken for his own. Marvin returned to music, but he was forever changed by those months in the gym, and especially by that conversation with Allie. The experience taught him that running from yourself only leads in circles, and that true strength sometimes means embracing the very thing you've been taught to see as weakness. The muscles he had built slowly faded, but the mental toughness remained. The calluses on his knuckles healed, but the confidence he had earned through pain stayed with him. Most importantly, he had learned to distinguish between his father's voice and his own. Years later, when he recorded Here, My Dear, and poured his pain about his failed marriage into every track, he would remember Ali's words about fighting for his music rather than fighting against himself. When he struggled with drug addiction and depression in the early 80s, when paranoia gripped him and he couldn't trust anyone, he would recall the champion's advice about facing the hardest battles inside his own mind. The recording sessions for Here, My Dear became his real boxing matches. 12 rounds of emotional brutality that left him exhausted but cleansed. Each song was a fight. each lyric a punch thrown at his own demons. The album was simultaneously his most personal and his most combative, proving that the ring he belonged in was the studio, not Kronk Gym. When he moved to Belgium to escape his troubles in America, when he nearly drowned in the North Sea while recording Sexual Healing, it was Ali's voice he heard pulling him back from the edge. Fight for your music, the champion had said. Don't fight against yourself. The irony wasn't lost on him that Muhammad Ali, one of the greatest fighters who ever lived, had taught him that his real power lay not in his fists, but in his vulnerability, not in his ability to hurt others, but in his capacity to heal through song. Ali had shown him that there are many different kinds of strength, and the rarest kind is the courage to remain tender when the world demands hardness. The irony wasn't lost on him that Muhammad Ali, one of the greatest fighters who ever lived, had taught him that his real power lay not in his fists, but in his vulnerability, not in his ability to hurt others, but in his capacity to heal through song. That night at Kronk Gym marked the end of Marvin Gaye, the wannabe boxer, and the rebirth of Marvin, the artist who understood that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is remain soft in a world that demands hardness, gentle in a place that rewards violence, and true to your gifts even when they make you feel exposed. The music industry would continue to frustrate him. His father would never fully accept him. The demons that drove him to that gym would surface again in different forms, but he would never again mistake courage for the ability to throw a punch or strength for the willingness to take one. Because Muhammad Ali had taught him the most important lesson of his life. The strongest man is the one who fights to remain himself, even when everyone else wants him to be somebody different. In a world that constantly demanded he choose between being soft or hard, weak or strong, artist or fighter, Ali had shown him that the real choice was between authenticity and pretense, between honoring his gifts and abandoning them for someone else's approval.